welcome to the February 4th, 2013 workshop of the Orlando City Council. Today we are going to address three of the priorities that we have here at the city, and that's public safety, downtown redevelopment, and sustainability. And we're going to sprinkle in a little innovation and see what comes out. So we're going to talk about energy efficiency and how we can put savings from being energy efficient to work. We're going to talk about the status of our police station, and we're going to talk about redeveloping two major blocks in Paramore. So I'm going to begin with John Ippel, our Sustainability Director.
Good morning, Mayor, and good morning, Commission. Hope you all had a good weekend and a good Super Bowl. We are going to talk a little bit about what we've been doing as it relates to our own facilities and operations for our city government through Greenworks, and how that may parlay into some other opportunities down the road. So last year, we completed our municipal operations plan, and this put the long-term strategy in terms of what we hope to achieve by the year 2030 in terms of how our facilities run, our fleet runs, where we get our electricity, how we purchase our materials, and that sort of thing. And so this puts some pretty aggressive benchmarks in terms of what we hope to achieve, but we think it gives us a good roadmap in terms of what types of investments we're going to be making in the future. As a consequence of that and some other good stuff that we've been having some great successes building LEED certified building, and here's just a couple examples of a affordable home in Paramore, our green roof in Fire Station 1, and our award-winning LEED Gold Amway Center. And where our power comes from. So this is at our fleet facilities compound over on Westmoreland, and we're in the final throes of installing solar power at that location. That switch will actually be turned on today, and that will produce about 2/3 of electricity required for that facility. And then energy efficiency. We've been really getting more aggressive in terms of how we're managing our facilities and where that, how we're consuming electricity and how we're better managing those facilities. And so as part of the EECBG grant that we received a couple of years ago from the Recovery Act, we did a fairly substantial energy efficiency project where we tackled 24 of our facilities and did improvements such as new air conditioning, lighting, building controls, hot water heaters. And through that process, we spent $1.2 million and had a projected savings of $139,000, and we're actually coming ahead of that now at about $145,000 per year. So we're beginning to demonstrate a clear return on investment through some of these investments that we're making, and doing it in a very financially responsible way. And so, for example, Fire Station 8 had a 7-year payback and tackled a lot of those things, and we're deriving a lot of financial savings because of that. And so taking that, we've gone through a long process of how we achieve that. We first target the buildings. We then look at getting some more precise energy audits. We hire outside consultants to do that, and that derives us, an estimate as to what the construction costs are and those savings. And so that's generally the process that we take when we're analyzing our facilities. And so through that process, we're looking at a new phase 2. Looking back at what we consume collectively, our city government, we're spending about $14 million a year on energy. So this is not an inconsequential sum of money. And so looking at next rounds, we're looking at approximately 96 buildings that we think would be good candidates for additional investments in terms of energy efficiency. And collectively, that comprises about 3.7 million square feet. So that could span from lighting upgrades potentially at Amway Center, City Hall. There's a lot of opportunities here, our community centers, and that sort of thing. So, we're saving money, but it improves the quality of life in a lot of these facilities. And here's just a couple of examples of some things that we think we potentially could derive money and what those capital costs would be. And so collectively, we're looking at about a $17 million capital project preliminary with a 7-year payback that would produce about $2.4 million in annual energy savings. So comparing that $14 million, what we're spending today, to the $2.4 that we think we could potentially save on these 96 facilities. And so we'll go through the same type of process where we'll hire energy audits done, and that really just creates the roadmap for what we believe we could do at each one of these 96 facilities. So one building that we did not include in that was the Orlando Police Headquarters. This is a fairly large facility, as you know, but in terms of other issues going on there, it may not be the most efficient in terms of its energy, but also the space utilization. And so, for example, 3 floors the jail is out of use, and that's about 3 floors at 22,000 square feet. So there's aspects to that facility that don't make it as efficient. And from a utilities perspective, we're spending about $370,000 a year at this facility. So we believe that there's a broader conversation that's probably required here. So in addition to the energy efficiency, there's antiquated fire and mechanical systems that needs a new roof. The elevators are fairly old. The air conditioners, and the list goes on of things that we need to be looking at in terms of how we're going to get this building back up to snuff. And so looking at that capital cost of about $5 million, effectively you're producing $75,000 in energy savings. So if you look at the lifespan of that building and that equipment, probably the lifespan hopefully would be 20 years, but the payback would be 66 years. So, we have to begin looking at what are some of those broader strategies that we can look at. And I think that begs the question of, what is the long-term use of this facility? And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to the chief, who's going to go into a little bit more detail on his policing opportunities.
Thank you, John. Morning, Mayor, City Commissioners.
Morning, Chief.
Okay, let's see here. The first photo you see is actually from the 70s. Mayor, Commissioners, this building was built in 1972. I looked for Commissioner Ings in his photo, but I did not see him, so I don't know. I guess he never rode the motorcycle back then. But again, it was built in the 70s, and when it was built, actually, it housed a lot more folks than the houses today. It had over 580 employees actually working out of it, 436 sworn and 144 civilian, and that did not include the jail at the time. And also, it had the city, the courthouse as well. For Chief Miller, it had the fire admin, and it also had internal audit. If you look at the next photo, and a lot has not changed going back and forth here, the trees now have grown, and we changed the name from the City of Orlando Municipal Justice Building to Police Headquarters. All right, I stated earlier it was built in '72, and when it was built, and this is important, it was built obviously as a fortress. It was built. It had the jail, and it was definitely not built for customer service and the type of law enforcement that we try to deploy now with inviting the public in to work with the community. Currently, and this is both sworn and civilian, it only houses 323 employees. It's almost half of what it was built for back in the 70s. John already mentioned this, 167,000 square feet. We have 7,500 square feet on both, or on all three, second, third, and fourth floors. It was never duct for AC, so there's no ventilation up there. It was our jail. So it's very unusable, and it's in pretty bad condition, all that area there. And I'll talk about this in the next couple slides, but decentralization, our community police offices, and as most of you know, last week we opened a beautiful one down in the southwest. And John touched on some of these, but the AC, roof, elevators, piping, electrical, fire alarm, it needs some substantial improvements. The technology side, because it's an older building, every time we do upgrades, it's very difficult to do any kind of technology upgrades because of the walls and so forth. And from our point of view, my senior staff, myself, we believe it's not the right facility for our modern police force. And I'll talk about this in a little while, but prisoner transports, for instance, if we make an arrest, we have to use the same elevator that civilians, employees are walking through, maybe guests that are walking through, to transport a suspect up to be interviewed in our detective section. And then again, it's being in the heart of the entertainment district with the Amway. It is when we get hot calls to get out of there, it's very difficult to get out at times with the traffic and so forth from being in the heart of the entertainment district. All right, this gives you an overview, and the point here is within the last 10 years, a lot of these have popped up. We opened up the Northwest Community Police Office up there off Silver Star. Last week, I mentioned this before, the beautiful building that the city just purchased for our Southwest Community Police Office. We have Paramore Heritage Bike Unit office. We have an iDrive office. We have a downtown bike office. We have the Primrose office. Since that building's been built, and I didn't mention this, but communications has moved out of that. And then we have the Southeast down off Pershing. We have the Lake Nona, and then, of course, we have the airport. Just photos of basically the buildings there and how many officers report. And like I said, out of 1,000 employees, just over 300 actually report to Orlando Police Headquarters. All right, location. Again, I mentioned it before, but it is getting even more difficult to respond to hot calls and get out of there because of the location. It's not the best operational or tactical location for that matter. On the prisoner transport, again, we still have, going back to location, and this needs to be mentioned, we still have the downtown bike office, we still have the Paramore bike office right there, in the heart of the entertainment center, which helps. Prisoner transport, I mentioned that, ideally a sally port where we could pull in, escort our prisoners without having to use the same ingress, egress, entrances, exits that civilians and just civilians come in and out to make reports and so forth. We're looking for a more modern, user-friendly. Again, we are always asking the community to work with us, to come in. If you look at that building, if I wanted to, and I hear it all the time from folks, when we have our teen police academy, when we have our citizens police academy, it's very difficult to get in and out of there. And plus, I have to use staff to be at all the doors to let folks in and out. Ideally, it would be nice to have a community room where folks can come in and out without having easily. It would be easy to park there, to come in and out, have the meeting, and then leave without having to pay to park underneath I-4, come in, and so forth. Property and evidence. It's really not the best utilization of space. We have all our property and evidence, over 100,000 pieces of evidence there. A standalone building would be better for our property and evidence instead of the valuable square footage of a main police headquarters. And then community events, training meetings, I mentioned that. Even the pill drop-off. We got this pill drop-off, but what I hear from a lot of the citizens, it's kind of difficult to get in and out of there to drop off. I clean out my medicine cabinet. I want to come in. I got to pay to park underneath I-4. I walk in, drop it off, and then go out. So we're looking at all these handicap access. Not good at all. It's really difficult for handicap access as well. All right. In conclusion, I believe it's time. I did this presentation over 10 years ago as a captain, and Tom and I were just laughing because we spent a lot of time in meetings. We did what was called a needs assessment. We've been talking about this for a long time, and I believe, my senior staff believes, that it's time to move forward and look at a new Orlando Police Headquarters. We sat down, we did a lot of space allocation, needs assessment. So we've been talking about this for a while and definitely believe it's the time, especially after John's presentation and the inefficiency of the building. We believe the Orlando Police Department has outlived its life expectancy. It's 40 years old. For the things that I just mentioned, it's got some major issues. And I'll be honest with you, as a police chief, other than security, when we're talking about enhancements to the building, I've been putting those on hold. Because I'm thinking, basically, we're on borrowed time. Why invest in something, other than security, for gates or fences and so forth? Why put a lot of money into a building that I think we're ready to move on? Mentioned about the location. Mentioned about no longer meeting our operational needs. And we've done a lot, like I stated, in the last 10 years or so on the decentralization side. We want to be out in the community. We want these buildings and these offices out in the community that we serve. And again, this would be another move for that, which would be a lot more user-friendly. And I said it earlier, but when you have a little over 300 out of 1,000 employees reporting to your headquarters, it's probably time to downsize as well as far as a police headquarters go. And we get a lot of folks come in for records. I just want a copy of an accident report. I need to get, fingerprinted. I want to meet with the detective. And again, it's just not user-friendly to our community. So with that, I will turn it back over to, we're talking funding now? Oh, Rebecca. Okay. Rebecca.
It's been interesting because, as you all know, I've been working with the Sports and Entertainment District evaluation. And as we were working with that Sports and Entertainment District evaluation, I saw these things coming through, and the convergence of all of this looked like some opportunity to bring before you guys to get direction from you as to how to move forward. I think the first thing that I want to do is to call Chris McCullion up so he can tell you what kind of capital funding we can produce out of the combination of these green projects that we're talking about and the savings that we could get from a new police headquarters.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Chris McCullion, Treasurer for the City. Just going to spend a couple of minutes on how we could potentially fund the replacement of the OPD headquarters building. First main funding source would be savings from the Phase 2 energy projects that John just described for you. That would allow us, one, to reinvest the savings in a new community asset, but also reinvest them in a project that furthers our energy efficiency goals. We also have savings from replacing the existing headquarters building with a more efficient building. We have the sale of the current headquarters land, the avoided capital improvement costs that John and the Chief both described, and some other sources to round it out. We have bonding capacity with the Phase 2 energy efficiency savings projects. As John described, we believe the projects will cost around $17 million with an estimated annual savings of $2.4 million. The debt service on the energy efficiency projects will be about 1.4, so that leaves us with net excess energy savings of about $1 million a year. And that has a bonding capacity of about $19 million. So that's $19 million that we could put towards the replacement of the OPD building. We also have savings from downsizing the existing headquarters building. That's estimated to save about $220,000. With estimated bonding capacity there of about $4 million. So bringing it all together, we could pull $9 million from the energy savings from the Phase 2 energy efficiency projects. We could generate $4 million from the savings related to downsizing the existing headquarters building, replacing it with a more efficient building. There's at least $5 million of the avoided capital improvements that would otherwise be necessary if we were going to continue to operate in the existing OPD headquarters. So all those three sources total $28 million. At this point, we'd estimate that the project costs maybe $40 million. That may change as we iron out more of the details, but as an example, we're going to use a $40 million estimate. The remaining financing needed would be $12 million, which we could fund through the sale of the current OPD headquarters land. We have some interest on the construction fund, and then we could find other sources to round out the project. And I'll just real quickly mention that interest rates right now are at all-time lows. 15-year borrowing costs you about 2.5%. 30-year borrowing is a little over 3.5%. So, now is a good time to take advantage of low interest rates. If you need to borrow money for investment in capital assets, now is definitely the time to do it. And I think Rebecca is going to discuss next steps in the project and let you know what you can expect coming down in the next weeks.
Thank you. The first step, obviously, is to gain some input from all of you to get your views on this. And we will be offering briefings and discussions with each one of you on this. The next thing is to identify a site for the new headquarters building, and I'm pleased to announce this morning that we are in discussions with Lynx to trade some land out at Tradeport, outside of the on the west side of the airport, with them for the current previous Lynx headquarters on Orange Blossom Trail. We believe, after discussing this with the chief, that this is a location that would be advantageous to the police. It has a lot of great access coming from all directions, and believes that that's going to be a positive impact on his operations to be at that particular site. That land swap is likely to come to you in the April or May timeframe for approval. We are still going through some evaluation, some addressing some issues associated with the current use of that of the land on OBT, and as we get to solutions on that, then we're going to be in a position to bring that to you. We do have preliminary approval from the federal government to make that change, because, as you know, that is part of the Navy land that we received, and so I think all of that is coming together nicely to get us a large assemblage of property that we can use to put our new headquarters building on. We'll need to identify the building specifications and the potential budget. Right now we're really operating at very high levels, and we need to make sure that the numbers that we have are going to work out, that they're going to come together from the perspective of the cost for a new building, and then what we can produce. And then the last thing is that I'm going to ask the council to consider expanding the scope of the redevelopment for the SED OPD headquarters block. We will need to go through the same process that we did when we offered the portion of that block that the garage sits on. We'll need to expand that. We're going to advertise, and there will be a public hearing that we will schedule for the 25th, I believe, of February. That'll be your next meeting. And at that, we would like to entertain the expansion of that. Now, entertaining the expansion of the option property does not mean that we would do this immediately, but rather we would sell the land at an appropriate point once we had the new police headquarters available for occupancy. So with that, we'll take questions.
Thank you, Rebecca. So it's a lot of big ideas, and the real catalyst behind all of this was when Lynx came to us and said that they would like to acquire some land down in the south part of the county for a southern base of operation. And when they did that, the thought of being able to obtain their old space that's over where our blueprint office is now became a very conducive idea for where a police station might actually go. And I guess Commissioner Lynham was here and Commissioner Sheehan was here when Mayor Hood 10 or 11 years ago announced a new police station. At that time, it was going to house the police and the fire department, and was a pretty big building on land closer to I-4. But this location, I think, is pretty ideal, and the chief loves that location. And then secondly, as we redevelop the Citrus Bowl, we've always had our eye on redeveloping OBT, or at least improving the state of OBT, and that would facilitate that. And then John's done such a fantastic job on all our energy efficiency things. When he came to us to say, wow, here's what we can do on a phase 2 of energy efficiency, all of a sudden we're filling a hole on how do we pay for a police station, and that comes together. And then we all have known it wasn't ideal to redevelop the north side of Church Street on the Amway Center with a police station sitting kind of in the middle of all that. So 3 major things all coming together, being funded out of being smart with energy efficient ideas, and then it allows us to progress in improving our downtown in Paramore. I know it's a lot to think about and get your mind wrapped around, so before we got too deep into the whole studying of a new police station, I wanted to bring this to council and get it out totally in the open and have some meaningful discussions. And certainly the chief and John and Rebecca and Chris will all be available for in-depth briefings, but this is at least the first step in getting information out there. All right, Commissioner Lynham and then Commissioner Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor Dyer. I think my comments sort of wrap around the idea that the purpose of this workshop is to not only notify the council but the public that the Orlando Police Department will be moving. And I was here, I've been here 14 years, when we acquired a lot of property along Anderson and Terry to relocate the police department there quite a few years ago. Terry, Chapman, and that whole area over there. And with the offer of the Magic to assemble that property for other usages, we've known for 13 years, well, a number of years, that, no offense, Chief, that you were living in property, using property that was more expensive than you should have been. So it was just a better and higher use for that location. And so this is apparently the argument we're making today, or the introduction to a reality that did not happen a few years ago. So I just want to make it sort of simple. But with the decentralization with OPD, I am questioning how large of a central station are we going to have, looking at a project of $40 million. That is a question. I think the links exchange just makes sense, because now we have a mayor who's always been on links, but now the chairman, so we can make other things happen. But for my part of it, and people who may watch or know from District 5, this is a new location other than the Anderson Street properties, the Chapman and Terry and all the properties we purchased over there. I would like to maybe at some point talk to Lori and whatever and see, we've used some of those properties for parking and we've done some other things, but a lot of families were relocated or dislocated. And we need to look at a possibility of how do we bring some of these families back into Paramore. There were 5,000 families moved out of Paramore the last 14 years, maybe even more. But I don't have an argument, because as long as I've been here, that has been the plan. And it wasn't for the Magic, it was just a plan that there was a higher and better use for the OPD was located. So that's not an issue, and I've known about the OBT South Street location. But I do think I would like for us to eventually shake out some of the other issues that address Paramore, because there is a great movement where hardly any residents are going to be there. It will be a real social, and there won't be any taxes from anybody there either, because everything becomes almost a social service or governmental entity. But we've got to stay focused on making sure people who can live there and will live there. So that is always in the back of my mind. But I don't have an argument with the new police department, because it's been a part of our plan for so many years. But I do want us to, as we move along, look to those thousands and thousands of families that were relocated and see what we're going to do about bringing some more families back into Paramore. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mayor, thank you for bringing this in very early stages to us. I think we've learned a lot in the last couple of years, and we want to move as fast as our constituents want to move. I got just several questions that kind of come to mind. So, and I got just kind of toss them out to everybody. So, Chief, one of the questions that I think of is we don't know the detail of how what you think it ought to look like. I'm not sure I really want to know those details right now, but I'm trying to think of, are there areas where we ought to, are there examples of police stations, are there places around town that are beginning to be a good example of the transition of police work compared to what it was? I mean, effectively it was the state of the art 40 years ago, and I remember when it was built. So now the question is, are there some that are looking at that are also addressing the flexibility for what may be the future for police work in the next 40 years?
Right. a little preliminary right now, but I will tell you, just opening the Southwest last week, we're thinking about the same concepts with the community room. If I get a ticket for a taillight out or expired registration, I can pull right in, have an officer step out, look at it, see that it's been fixed, and we can sign off on the citation at a lower rate for the violator. Just a lot more user-friendly, and that's how a lot of the police departments are being built now, and like we've been doing the last 10 years in the community.
Well, I know that, when the sheriff did their stuff, they basically took over the old Montgomery Ward and just said, let's just make it work because it's a shell of a building.
Right.
And my thought is maybe in the long term that may be worthwhile to possibly have us tour some of those types of facilities with to look at some of the long-term direction of where you're going.
Oh,
I know
sure
that Maitland just set up their, I guess they have
Which?
Are they public safety building they're calling that? So it's police and fire up there together.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course the long-term effect of decentralization. The questions I would ask would be, where do you see the population growing? Where do you see other locations going in the future over the next 5 to 10 years to make sure that we trying to address those population growth areas and that we're doing an adequate job of the space that we have?
I was just going to mention that we have talked with our construction admin folks what we are planning to do, as indicated in one of the bullets here, is to kind of revisit the space study. We believe the work that was done some 12 or so years ago obviously is based upon just a different type of performer. So what we're doing right now is beginning that process of engaging one of our continuing architects to work with Chief Rooney and his team and begin to determine appropriate spaces and getting input from Chief, from his team, from looking at other models out there as well, and define the best and most efficient use of space, one that meets the needs into the future as well, but also can be done well within the in a very financially efficient manner as well. So we are doing that. That's the next step in this process, with working with just conceptually working with the design team to actually come up with good space, good uses of space, and a good model to work with from a public safety standpoint.
Yeah. Well, y'all remember part of the background I have is that in a previous career I actually helped with the furnishings of that building. And so I was involved in that building as it was there and involved in the design of the detective areas and others. So I'm very familiar with some of those things that were very important 40 years ago.
Well, I've been there almost 27 years, and I guarantee you some of those furnishings are still there.
And they ought to be there. It's great stuff, and they ought to last you forever.
So whatever you sold or whatever you did years ago.
It's great stuff. But I would love to, if you begin to start looking around the country of areas, sure. I'm less concerned about the exterior appearance. That's kind of nice, but I'm more concerned about, you're at 323. Do you believe you're going to be at 290? Do you believe you're going to be at 425 because you're going to take over some additional responsibility? What would you bring back in-house?
Right.
Those are long-term things that I mean, I just...
Well, the mayor and I, and Byron, we've had some discussions on the detectives, maybe deploying some of the detectives. Commissioner Gray, for instance, when a detective has to respond from Orlando Police Headquarters all the way down to Lake Nona, they lose a lot of travel time. SECPO, Southeast Community Police Office on Pershing, we've already built out some cubicles for detectives. So we've discussed even having the detectives start deploying from Washington Shores, wherever it may be, Southwest, the new office, to save that time. And when they have to meet with a witness or whoever, a community leader, they can be out in the field as well. So we're looking at all that.
Well, I agree, and the question would be: are our satellite locations, if they're going to take on more of your responsibility, are they prepared to take on that responsibility from a security standpoint, from an evidence holding location, those kind of things? Because I would envision here that $40 million may get us what we want downtown, but we may need to also begin looking at upgrading key sites throughout the city of $5 to $10 million, because you're going to need to be able to have maybe a better holding cell Actually, in the southwest area, you may need to have evidence down there, and how you're going to transport those. Those are all related costs that I'm trying to make sure that we're anticipating for the next 40 years.
Very valid concerns, question.
The other question, I guess probably more to Rebecca's, your comment about kind of the steps and outlines. We are in a very preliminary stage right now, I think. I agree with the mayor that some things are moving us to a position that we want to make. But I'd like to see from y'all kind of a chart. I would call it a Gantt chart, but the idea of what are the major steps and about what's the time frame we expect those steps to be. So the idea of if we're looking at disposal of the old facility or a contract on a facility, it's going to be between 6 months and 2 years down the road.
Yes.
I mean, as opposed to setting some artificial guideline. Once this goes public, and it may go public by tomorrow, the general appearance will be, well, you get a new police headquarters, and it's going to cost $40 million, and where's it going to go? And we just aren't there yet. So I think we need to kind of bring the public along with us.
Yes, we have to start somewhere, I guess, and that was the mayor's direction, is we need to at least get the idea out there today.
No, I agree with that.
I think, it has, as we've indicated, several prongs to it. One is this energy program that we wanted to get off the ground sooner rather than later. But when it does affect the police department, then it affects, our redevelopment plans. And so, we're really kind of bringing together our economic development process, our green initiative, and our financing strategy, and our policing all together. And so, we just needed to get this out to you.
No, I agree. I just
once again, I think we're happy to bring any information back to you that you think is going to be useful as we move forward.
I just know that when I get in front of a community, I know that I think the city does it better than most everybody else, and that is we have a lot of discussions early on, and so there's this appearance at the end of it that we've been kind of there's a lot of information that's already decided on by the time it gets there. And the good news is, in this case, is a lot of information hasn't been decided on. Only we've decided is kind of the process. But it will feel like 2 years from now, when we get ready to make all these decisions, that we've discussed it forever. And I think they'll feel that same way to our constituents. So I think having those guidelines to say, look, thank you for asking, and we expect to report back in 3 months, and that time frame, I'd be glad to, the mayor's going to do a workshop, and you'll hear those details, and here's our top 5 priorities for the building, those kind of things, just to make sure that we're all kind of bringing everybody along at the same time. So. Thank you very much. And John, one quick question to you, which I'm always just kind of think is fascinating. 96 buildings that we have. Where's the comment? 96 buildings, 3.7 million square feet. And of the scope of Phase 2, what major buildings does it not include in Phase 2?
Major buildings that it does not include.
So I'm assuming it doesn't include the Amway Center.
It actually potentially would. So there's a lot of technological advances even in the last 3 years.
Okay.
For example, lighting. So LED lights, for example, were not financially feasible 5 years ago when we were designing the building, but today they actually are. Okay. So there are certainly instances where we would go back and do lighting upgrades to the Amway Center.
Okay. So
parking garages, many of them we've already completed, but there's several additional ones that could go through another round of lighting upgrades there. City Hall would be the next biggest building. So that would be included. Community centers, we've done a couple of them already, the first phase, but we'd wrap that up for the second phase. Potentially even Fire Station 1, we'd want to look through there again to make sure that same kind of things. New technological advances might, financially, there might be choices out there that we'd want to even look at that. So I would say all the buildings that are in the top tranche, except for the police headquarters, are preliminarily what we're identifying, and in addition to the parking garages that we've already completed.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the work that you do. It's been, I appreciate your thoroughness. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Mayor. Rebecca, I've got a question for you in a minute, so you might want to jump up there. But I guess the thing that's attractive to me, strictly from the business aspect, is that through a combination of the savings from the energy efficiency as well as not having to spend money on a building that I think we all agree is almost functionally obsolete, is a way to fund this through the bonding capacity. And so my question, I guess, Rebecca, is what will those bonds look like? What are the terms of those bonds? What would you guess those would look like?
Well, the terms of the bonds for the improvements themselves are going to be shorter term, because we can imagine that the life expectancy of those improvements would be shorter than a new police headquarters. If you look at some of the numbers, you might, if you look at them very closely later on, you may see, well, you know, why does $1.4 million produce 17 million, but 1 million produces 19? It's due to the term. And so we would be looking at a longer term, probably a 30-year term for the police building bonds, but a shorter term for the bonds associated, or the amounts that are associated with the improvements, to match them to the estimated lives of that. The shorter terms as well have lower interest rates, as Chris indicated, and so we want to take advantage of those as well.
Well, again, I know there's some good questions about staffing and the resources, technology we need, but just from a financial perspective, I think what's attractive to me, and the reason I think we should keep going, is simply the payback just from the capital investment on the energy efficiency. A 7-year payback is pretty phenomenal for putting that much money out.
Absolutely. I think the investigations that we've done, in conjunction with our Greenworks project, actually didn't only address energy efficiency, it helped bring into sharp relief the questionability of really investing any more in the old police building, because we can't really get it energy efficient. I mean, the building itself is not going to allow us to get significant improvement out of it simply because of its age. So I think, that was a kind of an aha moment when we saw that even if we put money into the building, it wasn't really going to pay back.
Perfect. Thank you.
Commissioner Rings.
Thank you, Mayor. It's I guess kind of interesting, Chief, when we talk about the Sally Port and the functionality of the Sally Port now, and I know we don't use it simply because of where the jail was.
Right.
But there are elevators that can take us to the second floor where CID is.
Yes, second.
Second floor where CID is, which would take us out of public view and that kind of thing, and it's much more secure if the functionality was that the officers do swing into the Sally Port, then go up to the second floor right into CID. You won't meet the public and that kind of thing with a prisoner. But that can't work in today's time right now, as it relates with the use of the Sally Port going to the second floor?
We haven't. I've been, I don't know when the last time you saw that in operation. I've been there going on 27 years. I don't ever remember using that Sally Port. I mean, I know it was used. I know it was used at one point.
Right.
And then Property and Evidence kind of took it over for storage and so forth.
Right.
But
and that's my point that I'm saying. Can it actually be used?
Well, I think a lot of it, like Rebecca just said, I think, yeah, you could pour a lot of money into that to get it utilized, but is it worth it in the long run? And I would say, as your police chief, I would say no to put that much money into it. I mean, we can talk about the roof, which is over $1 million that needs to be replaced. We can talk about the elevators that break down constantly on a weekly basis. I can tell you when I walk in during the rainy season, the buckets, the water coming in. But again, I think we're at a point now, Commissioner, where I think you could always make improvements, but is it feasible?
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I'm concerned about, too, and looking at the pictures of all of the decentralized areas, specifically even with our latest Southwest police office there, but I don't see anything in the heart of the black community, specifically Washington Shores, not even from a futuristic perspective that
Okay, I'm sorry.
that we could actually look at. I mean, is that part of this plan as well, or?
Well, we've had these discussions, Commissioner, as you know, about Washington Shores and so forth. You don't see anything on this slide talking about any future community police officers. I don't show any of those. That's I think it's fluid. We did just open the Southwest last week. Of course, we got iDrive, but we're always open to that. And we've had those discussions about, Washington Shores area and maybe putting a satellite office in that area.
Yeah. All right. That's all I have, Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner John, Chief, Chris, Rebecca, Byron, good job. There's a lot of work and detail in every aspect of this, but I think today is a good starting point and certainly a good idea, as Commissioner Stewart said, to make sure that the public knows what we're doing and coming along as well. That'll conclude our workshop for today.